Hi everybody, welcome back to the final session for today. And that session is entitled The Latest Carrier Conundrum, How to Enhance Service Innovation and Delivery While Improving Energy Efficiency. The move towards becoming a DSP will have implications for the network and how these digital services are enabled and delivered, which in turn, of course, will affect the energy usage of the telecom network. And at a time when telcos are looking to cut their energy bills, as is everybody, how do they ensure that their energy-saving initiatives are not detrimental to service innovation? And balancing these two objectives will require a new mindset for energy-efficient DSP business models. So let me now introduce our co-hosts for this session, Howard Watson, Group Chief Security and Networks Officer at BT. Howard, thanks so much for joining us behind the desk. We've got a great desk.
Thank you.
And looking forward to a great session.
Absolutely.
It's a really hot topic, or a couple of hot topics, of course. And let's now hear from our other speakers for this session. We'll get them to introduce themselves. So name, job title, company, please.
I'm Warren Bayek, Vice President Strategy of the CTO office at Wind River.
Okay, thanks for coming back for this session, Warren. Anita.
Anita Döhler, CEO of the Next Generation Mobile Networks Alliance.
Okay, the NGMN.
The NGMN, absolutely. Also known as NGMN.
Thank you, Anita. And over to the other side of the desk.
Yeah, I'm Manish Singh, CTO for Telecom Systems Business at Dell Technologies.
Okay, Manish, good to see you again as well. And Francesca.
I'm Francesca Serravalle, Head of Infrastructure and Energy, Vodafone UK. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, familiar faces for a lot of the TelecomTV viewers, so welcome everybody. And to start the session, I'd like to ask Howard to go to the lectern to give us our DSP leader's address. Howard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good afternoon, great to be here today. Very conscious we're the last slot of the afternoon, so we need to keep it lively, loud and controversial. But great to be here co-hosting this panel. And let me just unpick the question a little bit. First of all, we've said the latest carrier conundrum. I think one of the things that I've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years is a fast pace of serial conundrums, which actually make it ever more difficult as a carrier to focus on the final part of this question, which is absolutely delivering new and great things for customers. So for me, that sort of started in late 2018, early 2019, when all of a sudden we decided as a UK nation to no longer like a certain supplier that we'd embraced for some time, and then spent quite a lot of time worrying about how do we remove this supplier called Huawei. Let me put that as the first conundrum. And actually one thing to note though is each of these conundrums, I think, has given us long-term sustainable betterness, let me call it that. So we're accelerating 5G on the back of the Huawei conundrum. After that, coming very quickly, came the pandemic, of course. And if ever there was a moment where our customers realized the reliability and how important that was of their network, then that was the moment where we did the country proud. Also in the UK, the fact that we had superfast in 95% of the country was a brilliant piece there. Coming soon after that, supply chain. Struggling for a period to actually install for customers. But it's made us think about resilience of supply chain as well as efficiency of that supply chain. And so therefore now, this latest one, which is energy. I feel this and have felt this for the last 18 months pretty much every day, not least because we at BT consume 2.4 terawatt hours, 0.8% of the UK's entire electricity, and have found ourselves spending 200 million more in the year that's just finished, 2022-23, compared to the year before it, and potentially a further 50 million more this year compared to last year. So But the enduring benefit of this is we as an industry have woken up to the fact that actually taking care of energy consumption is important right now from a cost point of view, but important more longer term from a sustainability point of view. And that will be the good that will come from this conundrum in that respect. But also, interestingly, this is happening at the time where a lot of the energy consumption sits in our legacy. A great example, just imagine over in that corner, one of the EE cell sites, you look at it and you think 3G, 1% of the data traffic goes through it, but it burns 35% of the energy that powers that site. Reducing that legacy, great for reducing energy consumption. So I don't want to draw too many conclusions before the panel begins, but I will go on a little bit more because I do think we've got to look at this from a number of angles. So first of all, looking at the demand side of energy. One of the things that we need to fix working together is what I would call our over-provision paradox. So we as operators over-provide network as a new technology is deployed and starts to be used. And then the paradox is, as we move on to something else, we over-provide that same technology as customers move away from it onto the next thing. Hence 1% of data usage over 3G, but 35% of energy consumption. If I was to walk you into one of our larger telephone exchanges near here, we could give you a great tour. I could show you all 5 generations of broadband over the last 20 years, ADSL, ADSL2+, VDSL, GFast, and FTTP, all of which are still humming away, consuming energy with customers on them. And then just think about the latest 2 variants of that. So, certainly the VDSL and the FTTP platform. So I could take you and we could look at the head end piece of that equipment where initially we installed it, we put 1 gig connections into the core network, into that. Customers grew a little bit more. We added a 2 gig in. We then decided, let's get smarter and now put a 10 gig in. Then we brought FTTP and put it alongside it and put another 10 gig in. So I've now got all that backhaul for the same customers whilst I migrate ones from the fiber to the cabinet VDSL platform across to FTTP. We actually forgot, if I'm honest, to work out how to remove the 1 gigs that we put in before we put the 10 gig in. So we're actually left with 2 1 gigs, a 10 gig, and a 10 gig. That's the conundrum of not really thinking about over-provision as we start to shrink our platforms. And to say nothing of the System X that I could show you in that same building, which, believe it or not, is now 40, not the particular one in the Windsor Exchange we might go into, but in March 1980, the first System X was installed in Baynard House as a trunk switch, which is on the Thames in London. 43 years later, we still haven't managed to remove them, and they are the most energy inefficient pieces of our network. So the demand side, lots to do, but even looking at what we're doing now, and I'll use this to help challenge some of my fellow panelists. Network cloud, we've now got 16 locations where we have network cloud. Some of it, the control plane side of it, 11% CPU utilization. The average is about 43, peak is about 65. And so we've just got to think about how do we deploy that more efficiently as we start to ramp up on that capability. So that's the demand side. On the supply side, I think we as an industry have done pretty well at thinking hard about how we buy energy. And certainly at BT, we've significantly increased our power purchase agreements. But the one thing we have to really focus on is how do we take some volatility out of the last thing I want to be is a telco, because it'll also get in the way of me thinking about innovating for customers, is to have to focus too much on energy trading. But it's felt like that a bit over the last 18 months as we've looked at how to remove the volatility from our future cost forecasting from energy. So I think that's a little bit about that part of the question. I do think as we innovate, though, we have to think about not only how do we innovate in service capability, but how do we innovate in the efficiency of this infrastructure and capability that we deploy, and really making sure that ideally if we're moving customers around, we're doing it in a way which is we're not adding a load of energy consuming things in while we wait for them to move off the older piece. And in fact, that we are actually finding ways of sharing that workload as we continue to innovate. I also think, as well as innovating in services, we must continue to innovate in how we get some of this infrastructure to go to sleep when it's not needed, and to do that in a real clever way such that as soon as it is needed in microseconds, it's back there such that nobody notices. Because that way I think we can get real efficiency. So for me, actually, these topics are quite well combined, which is we have a great, I think, decade of service innovation ahead of us, but let's also make sure that each step we take, we're thinking about, bits per hertz per kilowatt hour, or how we can even more optimize the network such that peak capacity is there and peak energy is there only when peak demand is there. So with that, over to the panel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Howard. At the beginning of your speech there, it seemed like a conundrum countdown.
Yeah, yes.
Special one for the UK audience there. Before we get stuck into the session, we're going to take a quick look at the viewer poll that we've got for this session. And here's the question we are asking, along with the multiple choice answers. The question is, what should be the most important strategic focus for digital service providers right now? As with all the other polls, 5 options. You can vote for as many as you want, and we'll take a look at the results later on. If you're online, please vote as soon as possible. If you're in the room, phones and laptops, please do cast your vote, because your vote in this room is just as important as anybody else's. Okay, we'll come back to that a bit later on. So we have a number of talking points for this session. Howard has set us off really well. And the first talking point is from a strategic perspective, which is more important right now, service innovation or energy efficiency? So Howard, I'm going to start with you. And no, you're not allowed to sit on the fence, I'm afraid. You have to say what you know.
If I'm not allowed to sit on the fence, I have to say it's service innovation. We'll have to solve the energy problem, but we're only going to be able to, we've only got the permission to even be there to do that if we can continue to innovate in delivering great services for customers. That's why we're here.
Okay, and would you say that they're both of these things are very high on the agenda across the entire BT organisation?
Yeah, they certainly across my part of the organisation, they're very high on the agenda. But if I look at the energy, both the sustainability angle and also the energy consumption angle are high on the agenda. We've done really well. We've typically reduced our energy consumption by at least 2% a year. We did 2.5% last year. But and on the back of that helps with our sustainability credentials. And I think BT has been really good amongst the telcos at being in the top decile, actually, I think, in sustainability credentials. So that's been important for us.
Okay. And Francesca, I have to come to you next and ask your opinion on this, from a strategic perspective. Service innovation, energy efficiency, both important, but does one outweigh the other?
They're both important because the energy efficiency is important to deliver on our sustainability agenda, but also to enable the network economics that will lower the cost to carry and then eventually will help the profitability of those innovative services. And service innovation, as you were saying, is a must, right? Because customer and market, they demand new innovative services and new consumption model as well. And that is part of the Tech 2025, and it's underpinned by the network transformation, which has to be fully cloud native to avoid to over-dimension, as Howard was saying. But also we need to solve the problem of the onboarding VNF and the fact that they are using there is a very low rate of CPU utilization. So moving to containerized network function will help. We are transforming the operation both from an application perspective, OSS, BSS, from a data architecture, making FCAPS data and AI driven to really moving from quality of services towards customer experience, becoming fully customer-centric. And the reason why we do that, because we want to be a platform so that others can build on top, and eventually we want to deliver innovative value prop. So both for us are very important.
Okay, thanks. Anita, if I can come to you next, because at the NGMN, there's a real focus there on green networks, isn't there, and energy efficiency. When you're talking to your operator members at the NGMN, does this is the conversation talked about in a way is like, well, we need to achieve this, but we need to make sure that we keep all of these other things in mind at the same time?
Yes, of course. So we started already end of 2020 to work on the green agenda, including network energy efficiency. Of course, at that moment, it was part of the sustainability topic, and it became, I think, more an operational cost imperative with the increasing energy costs. So it is important, but at the same time, we focus, for instance, on topics like how to operate disaggregated networks. And disaggregation, of course, is part of service innovation. It's there also to be more flexible and agile to deliver services faster to our end consumers and to B2B customers. Therefore, we focus not only on sustainability, but we made it a very important part of our work. Yeah. And just to add, I mean, yes, we are an operator-driven organization, but we embrace the entire value chain. So we have in total more than 80 companies in NGMN, including vendors. And I think it's extremely important to collaborate on that topic if we want to achieve a real innovation in the networks to enable network energy efficiency.
Okay. And Manish, if I can come to you next, and then Warren, I want to get your view as well. I mean, you must be having these conversations all the time. Howard's thinking about it every day, but you must be having the conversations with your telco operator customers as well about these.
And indeed with us.
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. I think just to go back to your question on service innovation or energy efficiency, I think the answer is, as Howard said, both. And I think the opportunity in front of us is actually both, especially with disaggregation. I think how about getting more service agility built into the network infrastructure and then drive better energy efficiency outcomes. It was interesting to hear Howard, in the data centers, like what kind of workloads are running and what CPU utilization at which they are running, presents very unique opportunities to really look at, from a technology landscape, how we can fine-tune the infrastructure to lower the energy consumption as the traffic loads on the networks vary. Because obviously networks are dimensioned for peak traffic, and we all know networks are not running at peak traffic all day long. So how do we really take advantage of that? And there are a number of opportunities around that. Whether you're tuning the number of cores, you can scale down the frequency of cores, drive energy out from that to really make it more aligned with whatever traffic conditions are on the network, and on and on. I mean, we can talk about even on the RAN side, which is the radio access network, biggest energy consumption sitting in that part of the network. Again, wide set of opportunities that are really in front of us. But now that this has bubbled up to, as I would say, on the CTO's radar, top of the CTO's radar, that's a good thing, because this is now getting all the right attention. And with that, I feel very confident that we're going to solve this problem over a period of time.
Okay, thanks. And Warren, one of for Wind River, Verizon is a sort of real, one of the big telco customers you have. To what extent was this, what they're doing now in their RAN, that combination of being able to manage the network in a different way, but also think about new services? How do these two things play together at the same time in what they were thinking?
I think they play very well together, actually. Manish hit all the kind of technical ways that we're going to look at reducing energy consumption of the systems that we've deployed at a place like Verizon, right? You always keeping in mind, we're selling a service to a customer. So the number one thing that we have to remember is that is the paramount reason we're here. So anything we do in the energy efficiency space, such as lowering frequency of cores, taking things offline, we always have to be cognizant that can't affect the customer experience, obviously. So to your point, Howard mentioned this, bringing back those services in microseconds if need be when traffic spikes, very important consideration. But again, all of these things are kind of well understood what we need to do. Now it's just working with RAN suppliers to make sure that the objectives that we're solving for meet their needs as well. So working closely together with them is important to a company like Verizon, making sure that their customer experience is not degraded by these opportunities. The reason I say maybe this isn't so much a conundrum as we think, and I think Howard touched on this a little bit in his speech, but I look at a lot of the things that we're having to do to achieve energy efficiency. Again, bringing telemetry from the far edge points up to decision application levels that can decide what to do with the network, right? This is a holistic solution that we're looking to implement. A lot of those same kind of infrastructure things and interfaces and decision points and MLAI at the higher levels deciding what to do, those are the same pieces we need for service innovation. So I think a lot of the things that we need to get going for these providers for service innovation as Verizon looks to bring new services into their network, those same solutions and those same building blocks will apply to us achieving energy efficiency in the network. So I think they play really well together. And of course, they're both extremely important to all the providers. But I think by doing one, we kind of get both. Right? So I think just keeping down this path and collaborating together, making sure that all the pieces at each level are interacting with each other in a very tight relationship will get us both service innovation and energy efficiency.
Okay. And I just wanted to come back to something you mentioned, Howard, because you talked about the over-provisioning paradox. But if you under-provision, you get hammered, don't you? You can't afford to under-provision.
For sure, we can't afford to, we need to do it just in time somehow. And the problem, I think, is almost any dimension you look. I mean, there is, a good question would be how many FTTP, households are we going to pass in the UK, a country of 30 million? Because it could be 90. I have a friend who lives in Horsham. He has a choice of 4 fibre providers today. So, there's over-provision in that sense, which is the competitive environment driving it. But then there is over-provision in the sense, and I do think we are pretty good actually now at, forecasting that peak event that occurs 2 or 3 times a year where Amazon Prime, BT TV and Call of Duty arrive at the same time. And we can, build the network peak for that. We're less good, though, at turning it off.
Right.
That's the harder piece.
Okay.
But it's also true that if we look at the legacy network, then we have to over-provision, right? Because we look at the demand size, consumer, business, the rollout plan, and the traffic forecast, and we have to over-provision in terms of worst-case scenario, because eventually reliability, availability, resilience is key. That's what we do best. But as we move to a fully cloud-native platform, where we want to scale up and down based on real-time traffic, we want to provision network resource and function on demand, and that will be creating a service and application-centric network. So that is moving from legacy towards a cloud-native network.
Okay. Yeah. No. Great points. Now we need to make sure that in this session that we don't get sort of caught by the energy efficiency fever. The service innovation part of this session is equally as important. But what do we actually consider to be service innovation these days, and how can the current approach to service innovation be improved? Is it being improved? So let's focus a little bit on what is service innovation. When we say that, what do we mean?
I think, can I start? And I think actually this is really important for us as technologists, and particularly those of us in operators. And I'm going to steal a saying from a colleague of mine in the room. Nobody goes into an EE store and says, can I buy some Open RAN, please? Or can I have a bit of disaggregation? I quite like a bit of that this evening. We've got to get back to...
Love to see that, though.
What do customers want from us? And I think from us, we've got to continue to innovate in brilliant connectivity and start to build, ever new ways of creating services there that, help customers get time back in their lives, really excite the B2B2C market. Look at how we can take cost out of AI, for example, and as generative AI moves from being a hyperscaler world into a clusters potentially in private, corporates. What does a network look like for that? How do we use that effectively? So I think it's getting back to thinking about what do our customers want, and being a bit less obsessed with the technology and how the technology evolves. That's how we'll truly innovate, I think.
Okay. And to what extent, I'm just trying to get a sense for, is how much of service innovation is developing new services and how much of it is making what's already out there better and maybe easier and maybe more reliable? Because if we want to talk about broadband, the main thing that people want from broadband is for it to be always on. And when it isn't always on, it's not always the fault of the wide area network, but they don't know that. So is there service innovation that can happen on the other side of the fence within an enterprise, within a home?
Yeah, I think the one thing we're looking at right now is, on the fixed side of our business, how do we be the best ISP? From a broadband point of view, because we're using the same access network as many of other CPs in the UK are, but I think the real sort of grounds to compete in innovating are in those ISP services, but then also really having gigabit capability in the home. Because you're right, as we get above 1 gigabit per second delivered to the wall of the house, getting that reliably around the home or around the business premise is a new problem.
Okay. And let's just get some other views from over here. Warren and Anita, what does service innovation mean to you in the telecom operator context?
So I guess when I think about 5G, in the end, the service we're providing currently, the service that this telco space is providing currently is completely on, always on, high bandwidth, primarily to my cell phone, right? That's become the de facto standard. I think moving forward, as an industry, we have to start thinking about 5G and next G, whatever you want to call that. It's becoming more of a rather than a person to person or a person to device concept, we have to think about services that are things talking to things. So allowing things to talk to things and having intelligence at a higher level, deciding how to make that communication do something interesting that customers are able to monetize is really what's important. And so I guess I'm thinking we even have to define who the customers are. As a provider to me, I have Verizon as my cell provider. It would be very hard for me to be convinced by Verizon to give them $5 more a month for my cell service. So sure, I'm a Verizon customer, but I think they have to expand their view of what a customer is to these B2B cases and B2C cases, and they'll capture revenue from me through my use of other things that utilize their network. So service innovation can take on a lot of different uses and viewpoints in this environment, I think. It's a little different angle to come at it from, but that's kind of where my head is in this space.
Okay. And Anita, one of the things that the NGMN is looking at is looking ahead beyond 5G. So obviously that involves not just the technology platform, but what it can enable. To what extent is what you're looking at there applicable to the next few years and the kind of innovation that we might see from operators in that timescale?
You probably referred to 6G, right? So by 5G. Yeah, we started to work on 6G naturally already 2 years ago. And looking at the use cases, so I think where we all agree is that we cannot do the same mistake as we did in the past, that we start from a technology perspective, that we forget about the market demand. And we need to start from the market demand. We developed a number of use cases already, so always looking at the client side. And the big question is, how does this differentiate from 5G? So what cannot be delivered with 5G? And 5G, as we know, is not even fully rolled out yet. And I think the question about service innovation, so what is actually service innovation? We can talk about this for more than 1 hour at the end of the day, because I think there is intrinsic service innovation, what the customers don't really see. For instance, if we just take this area of security, I mean, is this service innovation? It's technology innovation, and the customer gets aware of this only at the moment when it breaks, right? What we, of course, don't want to happen. And then we, of course, have all other kind of services, which we already spoke about 5G, and I think we really need to focus much more on the user experience and the market demand going forward.
Francesca, to what extent is the service innovation, does that need to come from companies like BT and Vodafone and the other telcos, or should you just be enabling it to happen? Because I mean, I guess in the industrial context for enterprise users, a lot of them are looking to, how can augmented reality become part of what they do going forward? Now, do Vodafone and BT enable that to happen with the networks they develop, or are they innovating in that service as well?
Yeah, it is both, because once we transform the network as a platform, then we can have a platform play, right? And we let others to build on top and deliver the end-to-end services, or do innovative partner program where we do, joint solution. We drive synergy from a commercial perspective as well, and we do, joint customer engagement and joint GTM. So I think we're both an enabler, but we can also be, like, as part of the Tech 2025, a fully digital service provider where we deliver end-to-end. That will require a different type of selling, not selling the tech capability of the technology, but more of a consultative-based approach where we sell the value of the technology and addressing the operational and business challenge of the customer. So to me, service innovation is really, really holistic. We need to transform the way we create services. We need to be more agile, in-house capability, co-create with the bigger partner ecosystem. The way it is consumed, cloud consumption model through, a catalog-driven marketplace where just enterprise and customer can just log on and have, decide to provision in real time the product. The way we deliver has to be underpinned by digital capability across the entire service life cycle. And once the network is a platform, then we can bundle with security platform if security is main concern, with collaboration platform if the enterprise customer want to have a cloud-based collaboration tool, or with a cloud platform if we want to enable cloud migration and make it successful. Or we can drive synergy across the entire ICT and become a solution player. So really, I think once we transform the network and the operation, the opportunity space is big.
Okay, and how close are we to that?
Well, we are I think for now we have two stack, both from a technology perspective and IT, because we have to, right? We will have some legacy services in parallel with more innovative services, and that means 2 energy bills, right? As we have 2 stacks. And I think we are close. What we need to do, try and accelerate as much as possible, going from a present mode of operation to a future mode of operation, because that will drive innovation, but also reduce energy consumption.
Yeah, so it might be a bit of a tough journey on the energy efficiency side for a while. Manish, service innovation. We've chatted for years and years now in your various roles, and very often we've talked about this topic. What does it mean for you right now, and how do you see service innovation playing with your telco customers right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I agree with Howard. Nobody goes into an EE store or an AT&T store to buy disaggregation. Nope, they go there to buy a device. They go there to buy a service. Now, I'll tell you this. I remember this takes me back to 2005-06 timeframe. At Mobile World Congress, we used to go, and everybody would say, oh, the network's ready, where are the devices? In 2007, there was a device that showed up, and suddenly the networks were running hotter, and everybody's like, how do we throw in more capacity? Reason I go there is, this service innovation is going to be driven by what devices and applications come on the networks. For example, so that's on the consumer side. For example, we know AR, VR, these things around the metaverse are getting ready. They are the cake's in the oven, but it's getting baked, and it's going to get ready. And the demands that it's going to put on these networks I do not believe are anywhere ready right now to deliver them, whether it's on latency, most importantly on the uplink side and upstream data demands that they're going to put, because we've been building networks which are more downlink heavy. So we are going to see a paradigm shift as soon as these devices start to show up. Number one, service innovation today. Let's talk about that. For a consumer, an average consumer today, even to traverse between their networks as in a public network, mobile network, and Wi-Fi, how painful is that? And now throw in NTN, that's coming up. And now you start to see there is opportunity to drive service innovation to create that seamless connectivity paradigm to move from a PLMN onto an NTN, onto a Wi-Fi, et cetera, and there are opportunities to differentiate around that. So these all things are going to drive service innovation. We have definitely, as a telecom industry, have done a poor job, I would say. But the demands are all out there, right? So that's one. Second thing, moving away from consumers, let's talk a little bit about business, private 5G and business to business. They're going to put completely different demands on the network. And if you go into a vertical CIO who has been running their IT infrastructure and deploying Wi-Fi, they're not the experts on deploying a 5G network and maintaining and operating it. That's going to put completely different demands. And the winners from losers are going to be one who can package it, simplify it, and deliver it to these enterprises who are demanding that, but in a very simplistic way that they can consume. And I'll give you an example. We were working with one of the mining companies in Canada. Now, it's a mine out there, right? You cannot cover it with Wi-Fi. They have critical needs in terms of OT, or the operating technologies that they are driving, and the equipment that they're working. And they needed a private 5G solution, and we worked with the carrier in Canada. But one of the needs they had was also the ability for some of their vehicles who were working in the mine, as they would come out, to roam onto public networks. This will again require innovation, talk about service innovation. So I close by going back to disaggregation. The reason disaggregation is important is it puts the fundamental building blocks in place that enable that service agility and reaction time. If we don't do that, the ability to react to these varying needs that are coming towards the service providers, we'll probably not be able to address them as fast as these opportunities might come our way.
Okay, so the sense I'm getting is that we're getting closer to a point where the ability to be more reactive and also proactive, this time is coming, and in the past it's been much more difficult. Things have been a bit too rigid. At this point, I want to see if we've got any questions from the audience. I can see some hands waving at the back there and one in the middle here, but it's, okay, if we can get your name and your company and your question, please.
Mr. Lemaitre, Chris Lewis from Lewis Insight. Good afternoon. It occurs to me listening to the discussion that, as ever, to go back to language and service innovation. We've just heard some definitions of it, some of which might be integration, some of which might be customer innovation. My question to the panel is, what proportion of service innovation is actually inside the network? Because many of the vendors in this room talk about service innovation without meaning innovation towards the actual customer service being delivered. So I think this comes down to the point which has been touched upon by everybody, that we do need to think more about the customer, but actually they are, as one former group CIO said, a bit of an abstract concept within the telecom industry. So how much of this service innovation is really just happening within the network, which is essential, as we've been discussing all day, and how much is really down to the customer?
Yeah. Well, I think we can only deliver service innovation if we transform our network and the operation. And when I say transform our network, I mean from an underlay perspective and an overlay perspective. When an underlay means that obviously we need to upgrade the transport capacity. We need to make the architecture more distributed because of disaggregated network, but also because the application of those new services are completely distributed. So we need to enable new topologies. And if we want to become a solution provider, then we need a very focused interconnection capability. So I think this is from an underlay perspective. And then if we look from an overlay perspective, if we do want to enable bundling with security platform, with cloud platform, then it means we need to work as a platform, which means we need to deploy SDN to enable virtualized connectivity, NAV to enable virtualized services. Everything has to be API-driven so that the network resources can be programmatically consumed by others. And as we become a platform, then we can enable a few things. There is two plays. One is the horizontal play, where we can integrate with other NAS platforms, the Equinix Cloud Exchange, for example, and others to enable more reach. And then the vertical play, where the network resources can be consumed by IoT platform, cloud platform, VR platforms, AR platforms, and cloud-based security platform, and that will enable the innovative services. But we can't deliver service innovation without transforming our network. From a physical perspective, again, strategic peering is going to be essential, peering with a security platform, but also with application to drive application performance as well. So I guess everything is underpinned by the network. That's my view. I don't know if...
Okay. I would, and again, I do think this is where, disaggregation or layering becomes quite important in how we get to the ability to, it's hard for me to be a digital service provider when if you ring, if you're a broadband customer and you call up to a BT contact center with an issue and they ask you what your fixed line phone number is as the way to identify you, which in many cases is still the case, that's a problem. We're not, we need to disaggregate that in a way where we've got, and it was your mention of identity, where we look at, a much better, more modernized means of identifying customers, not necessarily having them tied to a piece of network infrastructure. So being able to do a much vaster array of services, and then to have multiple channels with true memory, and we've talked about that omni-channel vision for years and years and years, never quite got there in the IT space, but doing that, I think, also means that we could really, truly innovate in services. And I just want to pick up on one other point, which I do think is increasingly becoming embedded in the networks, which is the security side. And, being the exemplars of trust for your data is, I think, critically important for us over the second half of this decade.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anita.
Just to shortly add, putting for a second my NGMN head aside, so we spoke a lot about upskilling necessities for network operators and the industry as such when it comes to cloudification and disaggregation. I'm convinced that we also need to speak about upskilling or more cooperation with regards to consultative selling when it comes to vertical enablement of vertical industries, when it comes to service innovation. I think here we also have a shortage, so to enable a real service innovation for vertical industries.
Yeah, that is conundrum, another one of these conundrums that I first encountered in 1996 when I first worked on a telecoms publication, so it hasn't gone away yet. Now, I think if we got, yes, over here.
It was on dial-up internet, was it?
Hi, Robert Kernan from Apple Research. Innovation often in telecom conversations seems to be attached to activity that happens in labs and takes quite a while to work through the pipeline. I'm interested in organizationally, as digital service providers, where are you really locating that innovation function? And how is it different than just accelerating the pipeline through from labs in a 5-year time frame to something that, when you put service innovation together, that's an odd oxymoron almost in telecom. So I'm interested in how telcos are seeing that innovation function work differently in their organizations.
So, I mean, the approach we're taking right now, I don't think it's a good idea to have an innovation department anywhere. I think you need to continue to embrace the fact that innovation should come from anywhere in the organization. In BT's case, potentially all 130,000 people, including our partners. What we do have, though, is we have we've done quite a bit of work in the last 2 years to actually sort of separate a little bit between where we do research in a lab and applied research that we then look to downstream either to industry, or into our operations. And I think that, we are very proud of our heritage at BT in doing research. But having that somewhat separate for where we do service incubation, and we've put incubation inside our digital organization, and essentially to not encumber it by, arguably some of the slower pace of things in networks or in research, and that's the approach we've taken now.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what type of innovation we're talking about, right? There is the long-term innovation, the R&D side, looking more on 6G, the metaverse, the Network 2030. Then there is the service incubation part, where we're really looking on incubating new innovative value prop, where we bundled, the mobile edge computing, the SD-WAN, the MPN, together with a capability from an innovative partner, and then we try and incubate new value proposition and new go-to-market. But then there is also what we call it innovation on the short term, where we're trying to enable new ways of working, better collaboration, introducing automation, for example, in the way we do energy management, and breaking silos across BUs, starting from the data silos, because let's say, I think that the biggest challenge that we have is the data silos, is the inventory problem, it's the inventory, the mapping between customers, services, and network resources, which really slow down the acceleration towards transformation, but also the rationalization program. I think that is something that we're trying to innovate, becoming more data-driven and introducing automation.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. Okay, we'll take one more.
Or two more.
Francis Hayes from Appledore Research. Quick question coming back to the beginning of the session. How important is infrastructure sharing to balancing the need for energy efficiency and innovation at the same time? Neutral hosts, tower companies, infrastructure sharing. How important is that to making this work?
So if we can come to that we'll come back to that in 1 second, Francis, because it's a great question. Yes, there was another one over here, but we're definitely going to come back to that because that is a great point.
So I'm kind of asking this now from a very vendor-specific question, right? So, hey, we want all these great new services, and we want to do this transformation, yet just about every single operator, if I take the 5 top-tier operators where they're a customer of ours, none of them are running a platform of software that allows them to take their IP transport network to an MPLS SR or SRv6. We run an ancient code that doesn't have the capability for you to upgrade and provide the features that you're going to need in this cloud SDN world. And I kind of wonder, what are you doing about that? Because one, it's a drag on security challenges. Two, you ask us vendors, hey, Neil, we want some money back for maintenance and software, yet you're running code that's like 1,000 years old. I'd like to understand what you're doing about that, because we and I'm, guilty as charged. I was there. I lived the dream. We're guilty as charged about, hey, we want, we delivered this Call of Duty thing last week, and we pat ourselves in the back, and life is good. Yet our ability to introduce new capabilities, like for example, segment around V6. Could turn off half the network if you chose to have deployed it. I first started talking about that at BT in 2014, almost 10 years ago. So clearly my fault, but I just think that in the network that you've got right now, and some of us call that legacy, I call it strategic because I don't see any other choice that you've got. What are you doing as operators to bring this to the latest and greatest version such that you can really bank the low-cost Intel capability that's in all the latest code? So you don't need to worry about cores or turning stuff off, because actually the latest code will do it for you. And that gives you two aspects. It gives you the power reductions, but it also gives you the ability to offer new capabilities without heavy lifting or manual operations.
Shall I start?
I think that'd be a good, Howard. Thank you.
I think. And actually, Neil, a great poacher turned gamekeeper opportunity for us to work together on this, because
we've got order forms at the door.
And as you know, I spent the first 15 years of my career in a vendor when we used to have one in the UK that did telco. Actually, it was only 12 years. But I think we have become too scared as operators of change. And I think, we've been through too many periods where change meant outage, or change meant many people middle of the night doing things. And we've not managed to get out of that old world, one would argue, of getting into sort of A/B testing and just being able to fail fast and fix forward at pace. And everything just seems like months and months of planning to some enormous event. And in our network, or my network, that enormous event then replicates itself many times around the country. And each time presents risks. So I think we've got to find ways of working together to, really make that change a lot more frictionless than it is today. And I think that's the part of the solution for that.
Yeah, and we need to provide code that doesn't have issues as well. So it's a partnership, but it does feel like this is at the bottom of the list. So, we have what's your time to deployment on Ethernet, more dense Ethernet cards? So, we bring out a new Ethernet card that could save you tons in CapEx. It takes you a year to deploy it in the network. That's just ridiculous. And
at least we're now getting the young models that hopefully improve the speed at which we're doing it.
Let me show the presentation from 2013 for that. But that is a good point around getting a model where those sort of automation, those modeling capabilities, I mean, we talked about this, it wasn't mentioned in the previous conversation, but getting to a model-based world is really important. Please hurry up and do it.
Francesca.
Well, I have to say that I agree with Neil that, cloud-based SDN and SRv6 is important, right? And will deliver benefit from an energy point of view because we optimize the CapEx from an automation point of view. I think we should be kind to the service provider because we are living in a very challenging, environment. And yes, we're a bit scared because in a way we have to invest a lot of OpEx. We have a big bill in terms of OpEx. The revenue are shrinking. The customer are asking more, and the competition landscape is becoming more and more complex. So I guess, probably, collaborating a bit more, co-creating with vendors, and being less scared of changes, that will help. But to be honest, I will be kind with the service provider at this moment, because we're being brave. We have big bills, big investment to make, so that's my point.
I mean, this still being a bit trepidatious is kind of interesting, because we heard so much. In fact, we even heard this morning, I think, from Ian from 3, just one example that, the pandemic hit, people were working from home, the network traffic turned upside down, and the operators had to cope with that, and they did, overnight, did things. He mentioned 3 days instead of a year for turning stuff around. Now, doesn't that give the industry confidence that actually that you could do things quicker and better, or was that just like, oh, we got away with that one, and next time we might not be so lucky?
I mean, I wouldn't say we got away with it. I mean, what we
But the infrastructure didn't fall down.
No,
UK PLC didn't grind to a halt.
What Ian was talking about
great.
there, and I know Phil's in the room, and we spent a lot of time working on this, as with Scott Petty at the time as well. Much of what we had to do was turn on stuff we turned off, actually. But the most startling thing
about the power bill that went up
about the day the pandemic started is mobile calls to the Department of Work and Pensions. Which was a fixed line. So we'd done all this work reducing our mobile to fixed interconnect, and all of a sudden, overnight, the demand was enormous. And we did manage to switch it on within a few days.
Right.
But that's a bit different from, brand new service innovation.
Okay.
We are great in reacting, right? We're great in reacting. We did react. But what we are asked now, it's really changing to a different operational model, different, really. And that really requires to be brave. It requires new working models, new skills, in-house, new collaboration model, revolutionize the customer engagement model. That really, it's a lot. It's not just reacting to one thing so that you can confine and say, okay, I need to scale up this part, this transit. This is how the traffic routes are now changing because it's everything distributed. We could somehow control, and it was a well-defined problem. This is like changing the operational model completely.
Neil and I were talking about this exact topic just before this session, and it's a big mindset change in our entire industry. It really is. That, we've done things the same in telco forever. Certainly since I've been out of college, and that's been a long time. And, a lot of it was mentioned earlier today, a lot of us look the same, right? We're kind of old, balding, in one case, gentlemen who have been through this. And in order to change our mindset to do the kinds of things he's talking about, we have to pretend or start thinking more like the OTT providers and think in a different way. Now, I understand telco has some of its own important considerations. For instance, if we fail fast into a failure case and I make a 911 call, or in the Europe case, a 999, I believe, or 122, and other, people could die, right? So there's considerations that have to be made. But at the same time, we as an industry have to figure out how to get out of the old mindset that I have to be super careful. A network card in a year, we see things like that everywhere, right? Something new comes up, even forget about a new card, a new version of code for an existing card can take months and months and months and months. Whereas, in other classical industries, they do it, and they figure out ways to make those kinds of things happen overnight. I mean, so telco has to change. It's a tanker ship that we're trying to turn. So all of us collectively, not just the providers, but the vendors, everyone in this entire industry has to start thinking, how can we change our own mindset to have that agile approach, to get to these change points quicker and not be afraid to fail? It really is a mindset change we all have to make culturally.
How to be not afraid to fail seems like one of the sessions that we're going to have next time.
Yeah.
I do want to, because we are we're running short time yet, Manish, and then we're going to come to, I just want to say that, Francis, I haven't forgotten your point, and we're going to come to that with the next talk.
Yeah, I'll keep this 30 seconds. One of the things that you say, and I've heard this example about the OTTs and web scalers and their ability to really innovate at a much agile and faster pace. I think this goes back to the morning discussion, right, about the desire to become a techco. But remember, if you want to be a techco, you've got to own the technology stack, and you've got to start working and become much more agile that way, not just operate. And I think this starts to really, if we really as an industry want to get there, there is a very massive change that has to happen in the way technology is developed and consumed and operated. Completely different than the way we do it today.
Okay. Now, I think we're starting to see some of those changes slowly, maybe obviously not as quickly as could help out. But there are changes going on, and there's definitely trends within the industry. And one of the trends that we've seen a lot in the past few years is greater infrastructure sharing, as Francis mentioned there. So, and that is one way. Infrastructure sharing is obviously a way in which operators can help to manage their power consumption. So, the talking point we were going to bring up here is, are there any energy efficiency initiatives underway that could actually hinder service innovation efforts? Is infrastructure sharing one of those? What kind of implications does that have for the operations and the ability to develop and offer new services if you're using the same infrastructure as other service providers? Howard, do you want to?
I'd looked at this question, and I don't think there are that many inhibitors. I think, there are many advantages to infrastructure sharing. Many of them actually not in the sort of active component sharing. Sharing space, sharing facilities, sharing the landlord, presents enough benefit, particularly in mobile, that it makes sense to do it. Sharing passive infrastructure for fiber access. So there's lots of examples out with the active part. There's less cases. Neutral host is one where it's starting to emerge. With a colleague from BAI was here earlier. So, we probably couldn't have built 4 separate networks fully in the tube network. So I think, and inevitably there we are sharing the energy for at least that part of it. So the barrier tends to be, we all have slightly different requirements. A good example on infrastructure sharing amongst the 4 MNOs in the UK is I happen to be from the one that has the emergency services network as a requirement. That means I have completely different SLAs to the other 3 MNOs. And so therefore, if we truly infrastructure share, they don't want to be encumbered by my requirements and necessarily at their cost. And so we continually have those conversations, but I think it's less about energy, actually.
Okay. Are there any...
talk about, energy saving initiative and whether there is any impact on service innovation. And I could say no. Actually, we have been able to decouple the energy consumption with the traffic growth, and it just remained flat even if we are rolling out 5G. And the reason why it has remained flat is because we have a laser-focused strategy to deliver a green network, meaning that we have created a forum that enables collaboration across the entire organization, where we have IT, property, operation, finance, network, and we use this forum to ideate and create a list of tactical initiatives. We have strategic initiatives turning off 3G, rationalization program, exit nodes, but accelerating powering down of platform, legacy platform. We have an IoT program delivering smart sites, digital twin to do remote track of our RBS estate. But more importantly, we have an energy management which use a big data platform built in-house. So we ingest the data from both passive and active infrastructure. We have built a blueprint architecture in the cloud platform to do data management, harmonize the data, break data silos, and then build, using low code, build models, AI intelligence to deliver different use case, use agile methodology, 2 months, moving from POC to MVP, validating the value prop based on user story that created at the beginning. And that enabled to do for us great energy management, but also use case, creating heat map, and targeted action. This is for us really revolutionizing, reinventing ourselves and going towards that model where we do think in-house, we do in agile ways, we use our own data scientists, and we include cognitive capability across different business function, energy function being that one. So obviously infrastructure sharing deliver energy benefit. It doesn't hinder any service innovation because we still have control on our software, on the way we do radio resource management, but there are a bigger focus, many initiatives that help us to do energy efficiency without impacting service innovation.
Okay, great. Right, thanks, Francesca. We are getting close to time, but I do want to cover, there's another talking point that we've got here that I think is pretty important because there's a lot of moving parts here. The whole industry is looking at the whole issue of energy efficiency in a much closer way. Would standard industry metrics help digital service providers to better track their progress towards greater energy efficiency and possibly even service innovation? But it's really about energy efficiency. So standard industry metrics, would that help? Does anybody actually want them? Would they be useful? I'm going to start with you, Anita, because I know this is something the NGMN has been working on, so that must have been driven by your members, so there must be a demand for it.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, we did work and we do work on KPIs for energy efficiency, and one of the conclusions was that, for instance, the KPI for energy efficiency, the benchmarks, they should be directly linked with quality of service because it is very important to link both together. And yes, we need to achieve in the industry a situation where we complement each other, so don't duplicate, because there are several organizations actually active in the area of benchmarking, sustainability, and also energy efficiency. But we need to achieve a situation where we compare apples with apples, and that's really important. And another ingredient is metering, so harmonized architectures for metering. And what we also started now is an initiative to check and coordinate what is happening in different standardization organizations. NGMN, we are not a standardization organization, but we contribute requirements, and I think it's important to have this on the radar as well.
Okay. Warren, if I could just come to you, would these kind of KPIs and these kind of metrics help the industry and help all players in the industry?
Yeah, I think they would. I'm not sure how much anyone in this industry is interested in yet more standardization and more standards bodies.
Well, the ones who think they're the best, definitely.
Well, that's where I was going. So the apples to apples is a really interesting comment because I think it is important. And I'm going to take it in a really different direction, and I was hoping to get to this during this energy efficiency talk. Having apples to apples comparison of providers, I think could help with customer acquisition and retention. And I say that because I think I was mentioning this to some before. As an engineer and a person who thinks very logically, I look at my bill and I say, Verizon gives me this, Dish can give me this, all my providers, and I just kind of compare the bottom line and I'm done. The next generation has a much more complicated decision on how they acquire products and how they decide to stay with companies. And I found this through my sons. Their decision on what to buy, what service provider to use actually, what TV to buy, everything, their decision to spend their money, and in some cases my money, is often tied to things like green initiatives, which would be completely foreign to me as an input in my decision to consume something. So as providers, I think if we can prove our footprint is lower, our use of not just our own energy efficiency, but how we're enabling the entire world's energy efficiencies, if we can show that to some of the younger generation, I think it could help them acquire and retain customers.
Okay. Very quick thought from Howard and Francesca on this.
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that point, but also all the other stakeholders as well. I mean, shareholders, now expect ESG credentials to be well documented, and they're expanding into security now as well, and expecting cybersecurity KPIs to be published. That's quite hard as well. So I think we have what are called our power KPIs. That's the top 15 or 16 across the company, and own consumption of energy is now one of those. I do think there's a bit more transparency around the sort of scope 2, scope 3 areas. Particularly, there is a risk that there is a trend of us pushing the energy consumption out to the customer from the network, and I think we've got to be more transparent on that as time progresses.
Your investor sorry, jumping again, but your investor comment's interesting because that's another place where my sons will invest in funds that specialize in energy efficient companies, which again, to me, that's a completely foreign reason to invest in something. But we have to acknowledge.
Yeah, that kind of thing used to be lip service, but now it's real. Francesca, very quickly, would this help?
Yeah, we do need, yes, it would help because, as I say, we understand how the network is efficient, how our service is efficient is very difficult because we need to solve that inventory problem. If you think on the future, when we work as a platform, we integrate with other platform, and the service will span and transverse many networks and the entire ICT stack, it will be very difficult to know the footprint and how efficient is a service. We do need to collaborate more. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks everybody. We're nearly at the end of the session, but before we go, we need to check on the viewer poll. So let's remind ourselves of the question and reveal the votes received so far. So what should be the most important strategic focus for digital service providers right now? And service innovation is way ahead, in fact, way ahead of energy efficiency. So service innovation, 72%, energy efficiency, 42%. Shareholder
forget the money.
Yeah, so keep voting, please. And let's
no CEOs in the audience.
Yeah, maybe all the shareholders will come in now and vote. So, thanks for voting. Please do continue to vote. That's almost the end of day one, and it's been a great day, lots of great discussions. I'm going to hand over now to Guy, who has some announcements about what to expect tomorrow. Guy.
First of all, let's thank the guests of our last session today. Thank you very much.